you can't really have somebody coming in who was sort of earmarked as the understudy who's going to come in and learn on the job. You do almost need that plug and play Fabinho replacement now, and that feels to me like the alteration in the strategy anyway. And as you also said, Ian, like we're going to be well versed on some of the midfielders that are knocking around in Europe and indeed world football, because God only knows we've needed one for a while. So I wanted to touch on first the four names that have been sort of most bandied about over the recent days. I think James Pearce and Melissa Reddy both mentioned the same four. It was Romeo Lavia, who obviously we know a lot about. Ryan Gravenberch, you mentioned there. Calvin Phillips was an interesting addition to this. And Sofyan Amrabat, who obviously had a wonderful World Cup, was the talk of the town, essentially, in January, but didn't move anywhere and seems to remain on the radar anyway. Are those four names, do they lend themselves what you were saying there about getting in a sort of ready-made replacement and also perhaps signing the future one as well?
Now, I think certainly with Lavia and Gravenberch, they've obviously followed Gravenberch for a few years and they really like Lavia. So if this ended up signing either of those two, if you go back to the old plan or the initial plan, would quite clearly have been, I think they want to sign Lavia, basically. They want to sign him. And then they just go, right, you can go into the squad, you're going to play some games, this, that, and the other, and you can be the long-term replacement for Fabinho. And they think they get that sorted. But as we said before, now they're going to have to look and see whether they might need a more instant fix for the position. Especially, and also the other complication on top of this is, I know we mentioned it before, but say the offer actually comes in for Henderson, then they'll definitely need to buy two. And in some ways that might help them. Then they can justify, well, actually, yeah, we can get one for now, we can get one for later, and getting them both in. And what possibly would have been their transfer plan for midfield over the next three transfer windows has ended up over happening in one. But they have to be, as much as you like being proactive in the transfer market, you've also got to be reactive as well. And I think Liverpool are finding that out now because the interest from Saudi Arabia is just, that it's affecting not just them but quite a number of other squads. Going back to the other two names. Both Phillips and Amrabat have been linked in the past, and both times Liverpool have distanced themselves from it. I do think, can't see any of them signing for Liverpool, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think Amrabat had a good World Cup, got a good engine, but never sign anybody on the back of a good World Cup, ever. Never do that. I know Liverpool signed Cody Gakpo after a World Cup, but they didn't sign him on the back of it. They've obviously been looking at him for a while. Different with Amrabat. And Calvin Phillips, who I actually think is a good player, and if he'd been at Leeds and wasn't injured, I'd say definitely sign him. But he's spent so much time injured in the past 12, 18 months. And why on earth would Man City sell to Liverpool? So there's complications with them. There's a couple of other names as well. There's that Palhinha at Fulham. He's 28. And I know Fulham rejected 45 million. But if you think, Liverpool think that he's going to be better than Fabinho will be this coming season, and the following season after that, and you could possibly get him for 60, then you go, well, actually, yeah, we'll do that. That's the decision they're going to have to make, because otherwise, you may as well not sell Fabinho and just keep him, because you're creating a problem that you don't need to create, and that's something that I think people aren't really considering. If Liverpool do sell Fabinho, they're absolutely convinced they're going to sign somebody else coming in who's going to play, and that's the other thing we can take from it. And there's a lad at Crystal Palace, the name got mentioned yesterday, Decore, and let's put it this way. I'm pretty sure he's one of the players that Liverpool are looking at. But he's interesting because he's not young, like 19 or 21. He's not old. Like, well, I wouldn't say old, 28, but certainly older for an FSG signer, shall we say. They don't really sign players over 25. 23. He's had a year in the Premier League. He would cost, I think Palace spent 21 million on him. And the way things are just going, I think he'd probably be 55, 60. But again, if Liverpool think he can be better than Fabinho straight away, and if also he's a lot younger than Palhinha, he could be somebody that they're looking at. But as I say, Liverpool are looking at an awful lot of players. So nearly every player you see get mentioned is like, well, possibly, because they have to. It's as simple as that. It's not saying beggars can't be choosers, but they have to look at everything. And I wrote a piece yesterday saying that, Jörg Schmadtke in a bit of a difficult situation because he might have to look outside the normal FSG remit. I think since Shaqiri signed in 2018, they've only had one outfield player they've signed who's over 25. That was Thiago. He was and you'd argue that he was the kind of icing on the cake, cherry on the top. Not a luxury player, but he was somebody he didn't need, but it's somebody that would be able to do a job and has done when he's been fit. But This is different. They might need to go outside the profile to get somebody in who's a necessity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the Thiago one, for me, it always felt like that old saying, you can't look a gift horse in the mouth. And when you get somebody of the quality of Thiago sort of offered to you on a plate for the kind of price you were talking about, it just felt like an opportunity you couldn't really pass up on. And clearly Liverpool felt the same. I wanted to ask you mentioned Decore there and also Paulinho as well. They're different ages, essentially. They're in different age profiles entirely. In terms of your preference, I guess, or your opinion on it, where would you sort of sit on that? Because Liverpool could go and sign sort of a 1/2 season stopgap, or they could go and sign a 23-year-old who could do it for the next 5, 6, 7 years. Where would you sort of sit on that? Because I suppose in both instances, you'd still need the understudy. You still might need the Romeo Lavia or the Ryan Gravenberch to sort of to give this other person rest, I guess. So what would you like to see Liverpool go and do? Is it a Paulinho or even an Amrabat for a season or two, or is it someone like a Decore?
Problem you got there is don't forget they got Bashketic,
Mm.
and he's obviously a youngster who they really like, and the Liverpool fans have got the benefit of having seen him play, and he knocked Fabinho out the team back in January and February, so that tells you kind of the potential that he's got and what he can achieve. So they don't want to block his path. So I can't see them signing someone like the 23-year-old Decore and Lavia because that would just block
Yeah.
Bashketic completely. So they do have a decision to make on that. It'd be made, as I said before, it'd be made a lot easier. Okay, I'm not saying Henderson should go, but it would be made easy for them in their minds if Henderson goes, because then they need two players. Right, we can crack on with this, and they can justify getting in a younger one and an older one. Because Thiago, he's not going to play a lot. I know he's a slightly different position in defensive, and he's not a defensive midfielder. But with Milner having gone, Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain, who whether what they did on the pitch or not is almost irrelevant to the impact they've got around the place and the experience that they've got, which they've obviously imparted on a lot of other players. If you're losing Fabinho, which it looks like they are, and possibly Henderson, suddenly it's like, hang on, five out of five most experienced midfielders have all gone. Like, who's passing on the knowledge? Because they've all played Liverpool under Klopp for years in that midfield, and I know there's players like Curtis Jones, who I suspect is going to have a really good season. He can, but he's only 22. Harvey Elliott's only 20. And the two new lads, they're still trying to learn the first names of half the players out in Germany. So, we that's the situation Liverpool are in. So it's going to be interesting. As you say, had the Saudi Arabian clubs not come in for any of the players, Liverpool, the only debate they'd be having now is, well, when do we try and sign Lavia or Gravenberch? Should we try and sign them now, or do we try to put a deal in now? It's like, oh no, what's going to happen now? It's not just Liverpool, but I do think, given the way that Liverpool operate, and we know quite well that they've not been able to spend as much on players because they're not in the Champions League. That's fair enough. We know they missed out on Bellingham. I don't care what anyone says, they're definitely worrying for Bellingham, and I think they thought they were going to sign him until obviously Liverpool went rubbish, and he went, no thanks. I think to be fair, you can blame him. And that's why I look at things like, I know that the lad at Benfica, Luis, Florentino Luis has been mentioned. But I know not every player goes for the release clause, but 105 million, 110 million pounds, they're not going to be signing him, you know. But again, if they could get that price down to something a bit more reasonable, he might be interested. But again, that he's not someone that's high on the list because he's not. They haven't got time to be messing about. They can't be going for players who they just think, well, we've got no chance of getting them. They need to start moving now, and I think that's probably my own hunch is that that's probably why the Fabinho thing's taken a little bit longer. I think they're using the opportunity to go, well, we'll let you go when we know quite well we're almost certainly going to get not as much one player in, but we know there's two players there we can get. We've got to decide between those two. So that's my own individual opinion. I've got no, that's just through years and years and years of covering it and knowing the way things work. So that'll be my guess. But Fabinho is going to go. Henderson, whether he should go is a completely different podcast. We could talk about that for about 5 hours, I reckon. My own personal view is no, not really. Yeah, it is going to be interesting. But it's a headache that Klopp he just didn't want it, did he? He just didn't want it. He just thought, great. Last pre-season was difficult because it was all, condensed and there wasn't a big break. Loads of players got injured. Loads of players were missing. All this, that, and the other. And now he's thinking, oh, I've got nearly everybody back together. And oh no, Look what's happened. So,
Yeah.
such is the manager's lot.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that snippet of my conversation with the brilliant Ian Doyle. Now, we spoke about a whole load more topics on top of them as well, and they are all available now on redmenplus.com. So get over there, get signed up, and watch or listen to that show in full. And you'll also get our boss other content, including the Bobby Doc stuff, journal insights every week, transfer insights all the time, and the matchday stuff is coming back because the Reds are coming back. Go over there and get it done. Take it easy.